Welcome, everybody, to How to Pick the Right Practice Management Solution for Your Small Firm by myself, Hector Garcia, in collaboration with Earmark Video and Basil Practice Management. Table of contents, we talked about the CPE process during the intro video. I'll speak briefly about myself and about Basil. We'll discuss about the investment that you're going to have to consider and why your small firm should be looking into getting practice management software. And in contrast, what is the alternative? Then we'll talk about the difference between the operating system and the practice management software and how these two things can be in conflict or can be cohesive if it's strategically set up that way. And then we're going to go into the details about the process of picking your practice management software, which will be focused around a 9-point framework I developed for evaluating the features in the practice management software and kind of splitting them off between the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. And lastly, I'll give you a resource that will help you take the next steps or at least get started with the journey when you go out and research them or get demos or test them out, whichever process you're going to take to evaluate them. About myself, I'm a CPA. I work in Florida, in South Florida. I'm an active YouTuber. And if you go to Hector Garcia CPA in YouTube, you're going to see a lot of content I have created over the years. I run a bookkeeping practice and I run a tax practice for over 20 years that I recently sold. And I'm the co-host of Reframe Events and the co-founder of Right Tool. Let's get right to it. First, we're going to speak in general sense. The general sense is that if you are a small accounting or bookkeeping firm, you need to consider practice management software. The investment for most apps, look at the average app, okay, and there are apps that are in the lower price point, and there's apps that are always also in the higher price point. But most apps are somewhere in the $50 to $100 a month per user. Some apps take a slightly different approach, which is the per client approach, but it's actually not that common. Some general factors that make that price go up or down is going to be the firm size. So if some practice management software focus on smaller firms, they tend to be a little bit less per user. And then the practice management software that focuses on the larger firms, on the enterprise size firms, they tend to be a little pricier, and they bundle it with their tax software and whatever other offerings they're offering to these large firms. Feature richness, it's a huge factor, right? So obviously, the more mature the app is and the more features it has, it is more likely to be higher priced. Also, some apps offer additional paid add-ons. So you actually will pay extra for a particular set of features, so that could raise your overall cost. In the last couple of years, a lot of apps have been investing in AI and workflow automation, and the ones that have workflow automation and AI tend to be priced at a higher price point. The practice management software that includes much higher levels of support, 24/7, 100% US-based support, onboarding included, training included, those tend to be priced a little higher so they can afford to provide the level of support. When the apps integrate with other systems, whether it's another accounting system or another payment system, those do tend to be higher priced. And if the app also has billing and payment systems, they might not necessarily be higher priced, but you will be paying per transaction or so if you're using the practice management software to receive payments. And like I said, only a handful use the per client approach. The per user approach is actually a lot more common. Now, these are the high level bullet points that you should consider when, reasons kind of why you should look at practice management software compared to the alternatives. So a lot of small firms, I remember when I first started, my first practice management system was my memory, right? So keeping everything in my head. Kind of the next level of that was to writing things down or having an agenda, right? Really old school way of keeping track of things. Then, of course, most of our clients started asking us to do things, requesting things, giving us new information that's pertinent to the work that we're doing via email. And a lot of smaller firms and even some of the bigger firms tend to do this inadvertently, is they'll use their unread emails, their inbox, as their pending tasks, right? So, and I'm the culprit of that. Many times I'll have like someone tell me, hey, don't forget so and so. And I'm like, you know what? Email it to me so tomorrow when I get to the office, it's there. Like it's my reminder. So this is a very true problem that happens for people that have practice management software and not. But prior to having a practice management software, I know that unread emails was a big one. I think a lot of firms, especially in the smaller side, in the startup side, they go through this where they'll build some sort of custom spreadsheet. They'll go to Excel or Google Sheets and they'll build their own sheet to keep track of the clients and the statuses and the due dates and the deadlines and all that stuff. Um, so that's certainly an alternative. And of course, I see a lot of people using like Google Calendar or Outlook and using the calendar itself to add tasks into the calendar, to add the next thing they need to do into the calendar. And then based on that, they kind of manage their day and they'll click and drag whatever they couldn't get done to the next day and so forth. And that certainly works, but again, it just gets messy. And then I also seen people use software that's really not a true practice management software. Like QuickBooks Online Accountant has a quasi practice management application that you can use. It's not very useful, but it works in a limited way, and a lot of people use that as well. So I'm just calling it out and recognizing that all of these alternatives are legitimate alternatives that people use. The big thing to think about is, are these working for you? If you find yourself duplicating effort or deleting a cell in your spreadsheet by mistake, or not marking an email back to unread to remember that you have to do it, or falling off from the first page or whatever it is, if you feel any of that stuff fails, then you should strongly consider investing in practice management software. So couple of reasons here. It's one central place to manage all your clients' tasks, deadlines, and communication history. As we mentioned, avoid wasting time, duplicated effort. Once you have a team, two, three, four people, you got to keep track of like who tells the client what, who heard what from the client, because that's where a lot of stuff breaks down. And one thing that customers hate is having to explain the same thing to another person from the same organization. It is probably the number one indicator of the faith that your customer has in your company, from truly evolving from a one-man show to a multi-person firm. And if the discussions that we're having with the client are being lost through the through the crack, and the client feels that they have to do things again, tell things again, that's usually not a good look. And also for capacity management, for scheduling, for knowing who's doing what, and also for promising customer. It gives you a project to do, and then you say, "Yeah, I kind of have a feeling here in my head, based on my spreadsheet, that I could get it done by Thursday of next week." And the problem is, if you overpromise and underdeliver, it's going to be a big issue. So practice management software can help you do capacity management. And of course, ultimately, this is all to enhance the client experience. That's what you want. You want to retain your clients, attract better clients. You want to be able to increase your prices, get less pushback because you have a great client experience. And also, believe it or not, employee retention plays a big deal. I've talked to a lot of accountants that have quit their firms and bookkeepers, and I've asked them point blank, "Hey, why did you quit the firm? Why did you leave it?" And most of it was a lot of stress. I'm like, okay, I get it. I have a lot of stress too, and I'm my own boss. But where was the stress? Where was it coming from? And usually was on the fact that there's a lot of constant verbal inquiries that drives people crazy. So your boss asking, where are you with the ABC company file? And then the customer saying, "Hey, where's my tax return for ABC company file?" And then another team member asking you, "Hey, what's the last thing you told the ABC company people?" So like, there's a lot of the stress happens from the constant verbal asking about the client, about the file, about the status. And if you have a system in place where you tell your employees, your boss, your team members, like, everything's in the system, then they'll change their behavior, and then they'll kind of leave you alone for most of the day. And I'm telling you, it plays a huge role. It played a huge role in my firm. The amount of stress that people told me that they had prior to our system, implementing the system, and before, was huge. So let's talk about the operating system versus the practice management software. So one of the challenges that I see a lot of firms have is they'll go out and they'll fetch and implement a practice management system without having their own firm built operating system. And the reason why this is a challenge is because what happens is the limitations and the design choices that the practice management software uses, which is supposed to be a tool, becomes the operating system of the firm. So if there is a follow-up tool inside the PM software, then the firm follows up. If there's no follow-up tool, the firm never follows up. But the firm needs to decide: are we going to follow up with our clients, yes or no? And if that's fundamentally what you believe strategically as a firm that you should be doing, then you should be looking for a tool that works with your operating system. So don't let the tool decide what your firm does, what your values are, your strategy, your client philosophy. Don't let the tool set your processes, or you got to be able to create your own custom processes that comes from internal know-how, your standard operating procedures, any workflows you have developed over time that work for you and your clients are used to. You got to look for a tool that will adapt to that. You don't adapt to the tool. The tool is supposed to adapt to you. How your team best communicates, collaborates, or solve problems. That's part of your strategy, your operating system. And, the ideal way for you to deliver value for your clients, and you keep in mind that your operating system can evolve, right? Your firm can evolve, can mature, can get more modern, can get more automated, can get less automated, can go to a niche, could go more broad. Your firm should be Your firm strategy and operating system should be moldable and adaptable to the times, or to the intent that you have in terms of how you create change in the world via your firm. Practice management tool is supposed to help you operationalize your existing values and workflows. You got to keep in mind that it's going to have its own pre-built features, templates, and workflows, and some of them could work for you and some of them can't. So just make sure that these pre-built systems are not changing your workflow. The interface and the tool set provided enable collaboration. So when you think about how I communicate with my client, can the tool that's being provided allow me to communicate to the client that way I want to? And just keep in mind that the tool practice management also has a structure that does client delivery in a very specific way. So some send an email and say your document's ready. Some don't send an email, or they'll send an email saying there's new activity in your portal, and the customer needs to log into the portal to see what the new activity is. The new activity could be a message, or could be a document. Some practice management software, when you send a message through it, they send a copy of the message via email. Some don't. Some just say you have a message pending in your email. So keep in mind that all these little details could affect ultimately, the perceived value of how customers feel and look at the practice management, your practice's efficiency, you're through the practice management software. Okay, so again, it you need to adapt. You need to adapt the tool to your operating system, not change your operating system to adapt to the tool. Okay, let's jump to the 9-point system for evaluating features in practice management software. So we're going to go through these 9 points. We're going to talk about, basically, we're going to group the features in categories. So we have client and contact management, that's one category. The communication portal and collaboration, that's a second category. Document management, a really big one, of course, that's a third category. Workflow and task management, that's going to be a fourth category. Automation and AI, I'm kind of putting those things together, even though they're not the same, but they're becoming the same. The closer we get to general artificial intelligence, automation and AI kind of start converging into each other. That's a fifth category. Time tracking, billing, and invoicing, we'll group those into the sixth category. Security, compliance, data protection, that's going to be the seventh category. Pricing, scalability, and support, that's going to be the eighth category. And the ninth category is the hardest one to give a label to because it's got some of these things are kind of subjective, which is the ease of use, intuitive design, and quick setup. An important note here is that it doesn't have to have all of it. Like we're going to go through the 9 points. It doesn't have to have all of it. But when comparing solutions, I think these are the best way to group the categories too. Because I think when you go out there and purchase practice management software, it's really overwhelming the amount of features that it can have and how and you can have two or three practice management softwares that all have the same feature. So let's call it sharing documents to a client. So like all of them allow you to share documents to the client. The question is how they do it, correct? So exactly how they do it or what features around document sharing are important or not. So hopefully when we go to the 9 points and you go through what I think is the must have versus a good to have, you can also run your own conclusion in terms of what works best for you. So let's start with the first big one, which is client and contact management. So these are the must-haves. I think this is the bare minimum. This is the must-have. So you need to have a centralized client database with essential client information. So contact details, the tax ID, the entity type, the contacts with so not just the customer name like the company name, but all the individual contacts that you are going to be discussing with or collaborating. A homepage with a client dashboard that shows you all the active projects, all the deadlines, all the recent activity. That's a must-have. Ability to store client notes, so things that everybody in the team or a selected group of team members, whoever has access to the specific customer, can see the notes. That way, they're not asking the client the same exact information. And I think a must have at this point, I believe this is a minimum thing, is you have to have a custom field because everyone has their own sort of custom data per customer that they want to track. So they want to track the industry or they want to track, whether they're a tax client or a bookkeeping client, or are they a monthly client or are they a quarterly client? Are they a tax planning client? Are they a QuickBooks Online client versus a zero client? So there are a lot of custom fields have to be there because, as I mentioned, the tool needs to adapt to your processes, not the other way. And I think every contact management software needs to have some sort of filtering and searching to quickly locate client records because that's what we're doing all day long is going in there and finding client records. The nice to have here is having lead or prospect tracking. So it's not necessarily immediately all practice management software has to also have a system in place for tracking the leads. Generally, for practice management, you're going to track your clients, your paying clients, your engaged clients, not necessarily the ones that are going through a sales process. So I don't think this is a have to have. I think this is a nice to have. If you can integrate your client list with QuickBooks, Xero, or any other accounting software, that would be great because for some people, they already have that information in there. And it would be a lot quicker to kind of just get started and have one database, one source of truth for client contact information, which would be your general general ledger software. Anything with marketing automation, like for you to be able to send like newsletters or mass emails, or filter your clients by those custom fields and say, you know what, for this particular client, I'm going to send them an email or by birthday or whatever it is, and then okay, who's got birthdays coming soon, so I can automate a birthday message, something like that. That would be nice to have, not a requirement. Anything that's client segmentation. So could you tag the client, group the clients, and then use it to market to that group in that way, whether it's automated or not, even if it's through a manual process, that's actually really nice to have as well. Anything that's a personal information data collection. So for example, uh, you bring in a new lead or a new client and you want to collect their social security, their phone number, their address, and have them go in the system and fill that out instead of you, the user of the practice management software, the one that fills it out. That's a nice to have, not a required. That's a nice to have. For engagement management would be nice. That's like a whole nother category. There's actually a lot of apps that are not, they're not specifically considered to be practice management apps. Ignition being one of them, and Anchor being one of them. That they're really not practice management apps. They don't help you track the progress of work and what percentage is done, and you collaborate on completing a monthly task or a tax return. Like those type of apps, they do is they manage the engagement process. So sending the proposal or the estimate, getting the customer to say yes, the engagement letter, and maybe paying or putting a credit card on file if you charge them monthly. That would be nice to have, but that's not a requirement. Okay, let's move on to the communication portal and collaboration. So this is a must have. To me, you have to have a place where you can securely message your client and document exchange, because I do not want my clients to be telling me via email that they bought a house and here's the document and here's a copy of my driver's license. Like, we really 100% need to eliminate emails. Now, WhatsApp and text are considered to be pretty secure, because people know that most people don't share their phones out, and Apple phones, for example, have really high security, so it's very difficult to see somebody's text message or WhatsApp. So clients, when they hear that email is not that secure, they move to WhatsApp or text message, and I just find that to be just very intrusive and just very difficult to manage. So the idea is to move people to communicate through your practice management software and not through their text messages or through WhatsApp. Of course, internal notes and comments on client accounts, not just the communicating with the client, but internal notes, right? Like, hey, this client, we had a bad experience with an IRS letter last year. Just something like this happens. Please escalate it to partner so and so, just to make sure that we don't lose the client, because they said if another letter comes in, they're gonna blow up, right? So like we have to have internal notes that the team knows and looks at before starting to work on the file. Email integration. This is an interesting one. I think most practice management software are getting deep into this, where they'll read the email. Like your practice management software will read your emails, and if well, let's not say they'll read your emails, but they'll be connected and integrated to your email in such a way that if your client is emailing you, it shows up in the history of communications as well as the communications that were initiated from the practice management software. So it's integrating the secure messages and the documents the client is sending, plus the emails as well. So that's a nowadays that's a must have, because it's pretty much pretty easy to get done, and no matter how much you retrain your client to use a practice management software, something's going to come in via email, or the client, for expediency, they'll forward something to you really quick, because they feel that's faster than going through the practice management software. So the idea is that in your practice management software, you see the emails that clients send you, especially if they have attachments, to be able to transfer those attachments into like the general client file. Believe it or not, some practice management software have the email integration, but don't necessarily have the workflow to turn the email into a task, or turn the email into a live document that you need to work on, or a pending task or something like that. So that would be more the nice to have part, but the integration part at this point is a must have. Of course, notification systems, right? So, like, has a document been uploaded? Does a document require approval or attention? Has a document has been signed? Something like that. Having some sort of notification system, whether it's email or text, that would be nice. And of course, one that you can choose. Notify me for this client, but don't notify me for that client, or notify me for this type of task, or don't notify me for that task, or notify Michael for documents uploaded, or notify Mary for client messages. Like, be able to specify how notifications work is going to be really important. And clear visibility into which team members are assigned to clients. That's really important, especially the bigger the team. Okay, who's supposed to be dealing with this particular file, client task? That's really important. The nice to haves are like automated communication based on project triggers. So something that I like about some practice management software is that the team member can move a project down, let's say, phases. So it goes from phase one, get the client to approve the budget. Phase two, get the client to sign the contract and the down payment, or the full payment. Phase three, send the client the checklist so they know what to get us. Phase four, verify the checklist is complete. Phase five, work has been assigned to an internal team member. Phase six, work has been completed from an internal team member. waiting for approval from a manager or partner. Phase 7, report sent to the client waiting for approval. Phase 8, client has approved it. Now let's go into filing or e-filing or closing the document or creating the final documents. Phase 8, closing out the task or the job or the project. So when you design a workflow like that, however it looks, the workflow looks like, sometimes you can schedule triggers in between these tasks to automatically notify the customer. This is nice to have because not a lot of practice management software have that, but it will be really cool that as the employee is moving it down the list, the client's getting notification, okay, we're in this phase, we're in this phase, we're in this phase, because it will significantly reduce the amount of times that the customer calls you and emails you and asks you, what's the status on my tax return? What's the status on my monthly closing? That sort of thing. Another nice to have is being able to separate the internal notes versus the client visible messages. A lot of practice management software, any messages that are in there is visible to everybody, but sometimes there is intra-team messaging, right? Where two team members or more are chatting with each other about this client, but they want to hide that chat, but because they don't want to confuse the client or get a notification every time you guys are chatting with each other. So being able to split off the client visible messages and the internal notes, that's nice. SMS notification and text messaging capabilities. So if a client doesn't respond to the emails or a checklist of items and they're missing two items, being able to turn that into a text message that goes, hey, we're at phase 4, a document collection, and you're still missing W-2 and 1099 or whatever. Being able to turn that into like an SMS text message, that would be nice to have. Anything white labeled. So when your clients log into the portal, if it's not white labeled, they're going to see the name of the company that does the practice, that manages the software, right? The software company. Sometimes accounting firms don't want to give that away. Just they don't want to confuse the client or anything like that. So and they want to give the appearance that there's a custom system that the firm designed just for them, or that they're sort of a bigger firm that built their own practice management system, so to speak. So by white labeling, you hide the sort of the software company that runs the practice management software. Again, just a nice to have, not a requirement. Having a mobile app for on-the-go access, a limited app, mobile phone access, that would be nice. I think most practice management software, if not all of them, they'll have web versions. So you'll be able through a phone log in and do things, but they won't necessarily have a native app that is redesigned for the interface of a small screen. So having that would be super nice, especially if it's a client-facing app as well. Having real-time communication with chat, so when clients get a little mad that they can't text you or message you directly, that they feel that they can, but it goes through the app. So even though it's not as intrusive, that it hops right into your cell phone as a text message, and it doesn't mix your personal and your business life, you still almost with the same ease could reply to make the customer feel that they're with you in a live chat. So it's more like the feel of a live chat. And something I think is a really nice to have, I particularly like practice management software that have this, is whenever clients call you and go, hey, I'm in the portal and I can't see, what you sent, or I can't see 2023 tax return, I can't see this, and it's just user error. They don't know what they're clicking on. But sometimes you're not 100% sure if you set something up correctly, if the folder structure or the user structure set up correctly, or do they have permissions, that sort of stuff. So having a client view where you can see what the client sees when they log into the portal, to me, that's great, because you do the client view and you realize, what? Yeah, we made it confusing. We created a folder structure that's confusing, or we labeled the file in this weird way, or the client view truncates, the name of the file and it's not very clear, that sort of thing. Let's move on to document management. So the must-haves in document management is to have secure document portal with encryption, right? Our clients are uploading sensitive documents. We do not want it to be hacked. We don't want it to be easily accessed. It just needs to be secure, needs to be encrypted. Having a portal where the client can upload and download documents. So remember, some practice management software, only the operator, the accountant, uploads the documents and the client can view them. but having a place where the clients can upload and download documents as well. Believe it or not all of them have the ability for the client to also do that. Having version control, right? So to track document history and changes. And this one's, I would say, I'm going to add this in the nice to have, but if the client deletes something, I like to, as an accountant, to be able to undelete something that they deleted, right? Because people do these things all the time. Not all practice management software have the ability to undo a delete, unfortunately. Some practice management software have the archiving, where you get a software and you get a document, you archive it, and then after you archive it, you delete it. So creating a layer of protection there. Having a way to categorize documents like folders or tags, or any sort of categorization. So it's not just one place where there's a whole bunch of documents there, because it makes it very difficult. Being able to rename the documents once they're uploaded, that's very important. Being able to create a list of pending documents. So not just a folder where people upload everything, but a folder that says these are the 7 documents I need to have, and as they're uploading, we can see on the checklist, if these items comport to this checklist of items. And having document retention for at least 7 years. Most practice management software don't have this issue anymore, where they'll just keep data forever. But having something that's going to have enough robustness and enough data storage, so for at least 7 years, during the IRS audit period, that those documents can be there. Now, the nice to have, a couple of nice to haves here. So one is integrated e-signature capability for folks that want contracts to be signed, or things to be approved with an electronic signature, or tax returns that need to be signed or e-signed. Having that's a huge plus. Not a requirement, but it's a huge plus. In-app editing. So sometimes some of these apps allow you to upload a document, and the document was, it was a PDF that had a number that was wrong or misspelled. Being able to quickly change the document after it's uploading, so you don't have to download it, change it, and upload it again, that would be nice. And of course, having an audit history, right, that of what was changed, that's useful too. Having OCR scanning, so when the document is uploaded, for it to extract certain points of data, and then maybe the practice management software automatically categorize or suggest a category, or allow you to find the document. So for example, let's say we have a document that's called housepurchase.pdf, right? And I search in my software for the address of the house that's being purchased. But because the file name doesn't contain the address of the house, it won't find it unless the contents of the document, especially if it's a PDF, are OCR. That means they're translated into the text. Then you won't be able to search it. So that's why it would be very nice to have something like that. Okay. Having templates for document checklists. So the 2023 tax return document checklist, for you to press one button, create the whole checklist for you, for the client to know, and then you can delete items that are not needed, or they're not relevant, that sort of thing. Being able to batch upload, so grab a whole bunch of documents in one shot and upload them. One thing I really like is having a print driver to portal upload. So for example, a lot of tax software doesn't have integration with other software, and maybe possibly on purpose, because tax is very sensitive and they want to avoid integration to avoid potential hacking and that sort of thing. But being able to print the tax return, like going to file, print, the tax return is going to print as if you're going to print it through a printer, or as if you're going to create a PDF, and you press a button where you select, hey, practice management software driver, and you press a button, and that print goes straight into the practice management software. I love that. That's great. It's a nice to have, not a requirement, nice to have. Having exporting and backup systems, like some practice management software, you can call them and they'll say, yep, send me $150, and they'll literally back everything up, put it on a hard drive, ship it to you. I love that. I mean, I don't love paying the $150, but I love the ability to do that. Some, you can press a button and export all your file documents in one shot, one big zip file, organized by client. Just being able to do that, to me, that's a huge nice to have. So it's not necessary, not required, because you could download each document one by one, but having a single export system for backing up, that would be nice. And as I mentioned earlier, having document archival, so you can hide it, or hide it from the view, but not necessarily delete it, just to have it in like purgatory, so to speak, without a permanent deletion. That's a very nice to have. Let's move on to the fourth category, which is workflow and task management. So the must have is creating a task, assigning it to a team member, setting up a due date, putting some sort of priority on it. Another must have is being able to know the percentage completion, right? So which jobs are completed and what percentage they're in. So you can gauge as a firm leader, gauge where we are by client, by job, by project, by task, right? Having project templates. So, for example, let's say I do recurring monthly bookkeeping work, and I have my tasks, and inside my tasks I have my checklist, and inside my checklist I have documents that are required and not required. They're going to be sent to the client, and inside that there's also preset messages of things I'm going to send to my client via the portal. For example, the communications portal. So having a template with all that stuff done, so when you bring in a new client or bring in a new project, you just select the template and boom, it presets everything for you. That's going to be a huge time saver. And at this point, that's a must have. A dashboard view where you can see all the active tasks and all the statuses, a must have. Having that specifically deadline tracking, so a visual indicator of all the things that are overdue or they're at risk of being overdue or at risk at because they're overdue, maybe the client can get a penalty or something like that. That's a requirement at this point. Ordering tasks to ensure proper sequencing. So, for example, instead of just having a list of tasks and that's it, the tasks have a specific order, right? And then they don't have to be dependent of each other. I think dependency more is in the nice to have category. So we'll go back and circle back to that. Nice to have would be the difference between the due date, DO, and the due date, DUE date. So I learned this from my friend Seth David. And he learned this from a book called Getting Things Done. I think it's called Getting Things Done. And most of us, when we think of practice management software, we think of due date. So when is something due? So when does something have to be completed by? But the other date that we completely forget about is when are we supposed to schedule that project to get started? So when is the date that I expect us to start doing this work, which is different than the day that the client expects the results from the work. So these two dates are often not used in combination. Most people just use the one due date as the only indicator, and it's only tells you when the cookies got burned. It doesn't tell you when you should take the cookies out of the oven, right? So that's a really important thing because you want to know what those two dates are. So nice to have because not a lot of systems understand how the difference between the due date DO and due DUE. Having an internal approval system, like among team members, and a client approval system is useful. So, for example, I send a P&L and a balance sheet to my client, and I need them to approve it, not necessarily sign it, but approve it electronically, so I know I can now do the tax return, right? Or having a list of uh, tricky transactions that you send to the client. You go, look, this is what I best thought the categorization was for these transactions. Approve this before or approve it or add it in the notes before I go out there and issue the final financial statement, something like that. So and also among team members, like many times I remember when I was doing tax, I would have someone in my team prepare the tax return, send it to me so I can approve it before I send it to the client, right? So having an internal approval system and a client approval system, those two things, huge nice to have. Usually it's when they have that, it's just one approval system. So having one, it differentiates the internal versus the external. Having a client facing status report, again, not just notifications, but for the client to be able to see all their active projects. Because some clients are going to have multiple things with you. Like you have a client that you're doing the monthly bookkeeping, their tax return, and some sort of resolution for a sales tax issue from 2 years ago. So there's three things pending. So that we want to be able to go to a place and see that the three separate things can have three different statuses. So that would be a very nice to have. Calendar integration with a Google Calendar or Outlook, that would be nice to have. So you can send the tasks over to your calendar. So that way somebody's looking at the calendar and they know, oh crap, I have to get this done by today, type of thing. But generally, a lot of people don't recommend putting every single task in your calendar, because some tasks are stacked. Like you gotta get these 8 tasks done by today, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one by 8, one by 9, one by 10. So it just becomes very confusing when when your calendar is full of tasks. Okay, so it's a nice to have, not a must have, because of that reason. Automated reminders were for approaching deadlines. So reminding me, my team member, my client that, hey, these tasks are incomplete, or these documents haven't been uploaded. Something that happens automatically, that would be a nice to have. Time estimates for tasks, like if you're able to set up in your settings to go, you know what, reconciling a bank account takes an hour, and adjusting the balance sheet takes 30 minutes, and revising a last year's tax return takes 30 minutes, or whatever. And you create kind of a template of how long things generally take. So then when you create a full project with a bunch of tasks, the system tells you, okay, it looks like this is going to be a 6.25-hour job. But looking at all the tasks together. Again, not required, but nice to have for capacity planning. There's a Kanban board view. So if you know what Kanban is, you can go to Google and look that up. So a Kanban view is a nice to have, right? Because that's one of the most popular ways to do project management and workflow management. A recurring task creation for repetitive processes. So having a template for your monthly bookkeeping, but then the monthly bookkeeping task for June and for July and for August gets created automatically once you close the previous month. That would be awesome. That way you don't have to go in there and kind of create them all in one shot every single month. And then task interdependency. So like you cannot get one task checked off until you get a task that's above it checked off. So that's to avoid errors of people skipping things, or forcing the user to say, yes, this was completed before I can check something that's under it completed. All right, let's move on to automation and AI. So the must have is you have to have some sort of automation workflow when milestones are completed. Like when I complete task A, it needs to be automatically tell me that the next thing is task B. And then when that task B is done, it automatically tells me. So I shouldn't tell it what the next thing is if I already created a bunch of tasks and I've been finished them in progress. So having the workflow, the dashboard, the client list tell you where you are in the process automatically based on the last thing you completed, that's a minimum requirement. Having a templated processes that you can trigger with one click. So again, you have a whole bunch of steps that you take. You hit one click and the template shows up, and you being able to check those off as you go. Really important. Automatic reminders for clients about pending items, and that's a must-have. And some of these are sort of repeated across categories, but again, we mention them again because they're so important. Having schedule reports. So if I could create a schedule report every month for my statuses, or once a week, because a lot of firms, they'll have like a scheduled time they'll meet. Like they'll meet every Monday at 8 a.m. or the first and the 15th, or the first of the month, or whatever. And then you'd be able to automatically have the report, the specific thing generated, so you don't have to go in there once a month or once a week or whatever and create that. And being able to process multiple items simultaneously. So you have a list of 10 things, and not having to go one, two, three, just being able to like shift click and click a bunch and get a bunch of things done at the same time. That's a must have. The nice to have at this point is anything with like ChatGPT or or AI powered suggestions, where it's looking at what you're doing and saying, you know what, it looks like you're repeating this task over and over, or it looks like you're consistently skipping 2 steps before getting there. That would be a nice to have, and that's kind of where it's moving. Anything that like will smooth over your emails, where you write an email and before you hit send and go, hey, do you mean to angry text this client about let's smooth it over, let's make it a little bit cleaner, more polished type of stuff. That's nice to have. Not requirement, because you could copy and paste the stuff from ChatGPT, but that'd be nice to have. Anything that's predictive, like, so if you see that you start adding a bunch of projects and a bunch of deadlines and due dates and assigning team members, and they go to you and say, you know what, the next couple of weeks, I don't think this job could be all this work cannot be completed. It's just not physically possible. There's not enough hours of the day. So something that would practically tell you that. That would be a nice to have. Again, not a must have. Smart categorization and labeling. So, like for it to read the document and understand that is a W 2 and put it in the right folder, or understand it's a 2024 document and put it in the right folder, or understand as a receipt for credit card 123 and put it in that folder. Again, nice to have, but practice management software are going to have that eventually. As we mentioned earlier, extracting data from the forms, tax forms and stuff like that, to be able to categorize or label the documents, and having a GL integration with the actual transactions. Right, that's starting to happen, where the practice management software talks to QuickBooks. I'm not talking about the accountant's QuickBooks file. I'm talking about the client's QuickBooks file, the client zero file, and be able to read data from there. And based on the stuff that it's reading, it could create tasks or complete tasks. It could go both ways. So imagine a world where your practice management software is connected to your QuickBooks and knows when you reconciled a bank or so. So instead of you having finishing the reconciliation and then switching over to the practice management software and checking off the fact that you reconciled it, it does it for you automatically. That would be incredible. Again, a nice to have, not a requirement. On the next category, time tracking, billing, and invoicing. So must have at this point any sort of time tracking for you to say this project took 10 hours, or start, do the work, stop, and it measure that. So that's low hanging fruit. Every system should have that. Then being able to run a report, like how much time am I spending per team member, per project, per client, because you're tracking the time, that I need a report that shows me the time. Any comparison tools to analyze resource allocation. So be able to see which employees are working more or working less, or being more efficient, or utilization rate, all that stuff. And then being able to make a distinction between billable hours and non-billable hours, and sort of analysis of how much time is being spent doing admin time. So not all the time that you're tracking is on clients. Sometimes you're tracking internal training or whatever. So that'll be nice. That's must have if you're doing any sort of time tracking. On the nice to have is, well, automatically invoicing from track time. You don't have to have it. Not all practice management software have to invoice the client. You could invoice with your own software. Integration with third-party bill payments. So if you want to use PayPal or some other Square or whatever to as the processor to collect the payment instead of their own built-in, or the partners that practice management software use, be able to pick that. That's a nice to have. Of course, online payment processing, just being able to charge clients directly through it, that's nice. Client portal, this restriction access for unpaid invoices. So some practice management software have it set up that if the invoice is not paid, they can look at the tax return or something like that. That's actually pretty cool. Be able to have time budget versus actual. So you say, hey, I'm doing a value price engagement, a fixed fee engagement, and I'm not tracking time to charge my clients. I'm just tracking time to figure out whether what I thought it would take is what it actually took, type of thing. Retainer tracking for prepaid hours. So if you do charge by the hour and you get $3,000 of that, to be able to know somewhere really quickly, this client has this much balance in their retainer. Profitability analysis by client and by service type, because you're tracking time, of course, and maybe tying the cost of the team member in it. Syncing invoices and payments with your GL software. So if you are going to be invoicing to the practice management software, it'll be nice to integrate that with with the accounting from your accounting firm, whatever system you use. Next category: security, compliance, and data protection. So at this point, every company should have 250 bit encryption for data at rest and in transit. Okay, because um, when the documents get transferred, there has to be the encryption too. It's not just when the document has been uploaded. Okay, in that folder they're encrypted, but it's the entire upload and download process, client, employees, everything encrypted as well. Two-factor authentication, at least as an option, where somebody has to get a text message or something like that to be able to log in. Having regular security testing and audits and updates in the infrastructure and the application. So the application is kind of like the front end, right? The website, and then the infrastructure is the database, right, where all the data is being stored. Having clear user permissions and data access restriction systems. So this is really important when you want the team members to be able to access the software or not be able to access the software, or maybe or team members that can access certain clients and not other clients. I had an accounting firm that I was doing some consulting work for, and the owner of the firm had their own documents there for their own personal tax return. And the most important thing is that they don't want any team member to be able to access that folder, right? So that's a good example. Having backup and recovery protocols, right? So if they are down or if they get hacked, what is the protocol? So knowing that, that's important. Nice to have is having a sandbox or test environment so you can train a new team member and not screw things up. Let them delete or play with stuff, change tasks without changing your actual thing. That's very nice. Granular internal access controls by client or document type for their team, right? So if if you have a client that as a team member and the only thing they're allowed to do is upload receipts, but they can, you want to restrict them to not be able to look at the individual business owner's tax returns, gotta be able to do that for their team. That's a nice to have. Not all have that. Temporary access links to me is really important. So for example, our clients all the time send returns to the banker or to the lawyer, right? Or to an underwriter of sorts, right? So we don't want to be the ones that have to like send the stuff to them. We want the clients to be able to go share, put somebody's email, and give them temporary access to get those documents so they can process the loan or the application or whatever. IP restrictions, like being able to say, you know what, my team is never going to work from outside the United States, so I'll just limit, anybody coming from outside the United States. Or my team, it's only in Italy and Argentina, Mexico, and US. These are the only four countries that people can log in from. Something like that. That would be very nice to have. Having detailed audit logs of all system activity, your unusual logins, unusual activity, like it looks like there was a lot of document deletion yesterday, and usually you don't have that level of document deletion. Having something like that and having SOC 2 compliance certification, not all the apps have that. The last two categories here are pricing, scalability, and support. So the must-haves here is transparent pricing structure, no hidden fees, of course, ability to add and remove users as needed, so be able to scale up and down, having quick response to technical issues, at least 24 hours. Some have immediate access and chat and that sort of thing, but having at least 24 hours to solve all problems with the practice management software, that's a requirement, especially during tax season. Regular software updates and enhancements, of course, no software is perfect and there's always opportunities to make it better. And having comprehensive knowledge base, help documentation, right? A nice to have would be having educational resources that are not software related, right? Things that have to do with managing your practice, but not with the practice management software, right? Because it complements each other. Useful information, thought leadership, CPE content that you get as part of the package for having this practice management software. Having direct support for clients. So some practice management software, if the client has a problem logging into the portal or with the app, they call the practice management software and get support directly through them. That's amazing. A public roadmap would be nice. So knowing like what they're working on and a feature request and voting system to see how the other accountants are prioritizing what they need from the software. So be able to see that. That's a very nice to have. And having a dedicated onboarding specialist to help you implement it. Also nice to have. I still recommend getting an expert that has worked with that practice management before to help you implement, but having someone internal as an option, that's great. On the last category, easy to use, intuitive design, and quick setup. So easy to use AI for accountants that don't require extensive training. Having training manuals or video tutorials, that's a must have at this point. A simple experience for clients. I think it can be complicated for the accountant, but it cannot be complicated for the client. If you don't get client adoption, this whole thing is not going to work. You're going to get a lot of frustration and overhead. People calling you and saying, I can't log into the portal. I don't understand how to do this. I can't upload. I don't see the checklist, all that stuff. And being able to customize your UI based on preferences, that's really good, really important. It's a must have, in my opinion. The nice to haves is having a unified UI across desktop, laptop, tablet, mobile. And that's very difficult because the interface on a tablet, a mobile, a desktop, or a large screen multi-screen desktop or laptop could be a little bit different. But having consistent UI where the design is thought, so you don't have to kind of rethink where, okay, oh, I'm in the tablet, therefore this button doesn't work in the tablet. That's very frustrating. So you want to get rid of that. Having a visually pleasant design. If you're looking at the software all day long, it needs to be visually pleasant because people are not going to want to log into it. Having I didn't put it in the bullet points, so maybe I should add it. Is having a dark mode. Actually, I'm going to add that one on the spot here. Dark mode. I just thought about that because some people have this white screen in front of them, like staring at them the whole time. Sometimes just having it dark, could be better on your eyes. That's a nice to have too. And having some sort of express setup option where they can get up and running within the hour. I think a lot of people fail with this practice management software because it feels so much of a chore to get on it, and it's some 4 or 5 hours of setup before you can even feel anything tangible with it. So having an option where you're kind of up and running and you can go back and change some settings afterwards, that would be very nice. So the next steps here and the kind of the homework for you is you are going to the folks from Basil are going to send you the slides and this document. And basically, what this is a questionnaire. These are questions you're going to ask yourself as a firm leader, firm owner. There are questions you're going to ask the practice management software rep when you're doing a demo or having a conversation, and then questions your clients might ask. And all these are built based on each category. So essentially, the entire presentation is summarized into these questions. And if you grab this document, you print it, you start answering these questions yourself, it might take you a good 2 hours to kind of get through it. But I guarantee you that you go through the exercise of downloading this document and answering those questions and being ready to answer those questions, you're going to be much, much better equipped to go purchase your practice management software. So I want to thank Basil Practice Management, which is one of the practice management software that is out there that you should consider. They are refreshingly simple accounting practice management software. Alison is the head of customer success. If you are in the market for practice management software, contact Alison, check out the website, get Basil the app, email her, call her, she'll set up a demo, answer all your questions. I'm not telling you this is the only one out there. Use this webinar, use this content to guide you and help you to choose the best possible practice management for you that works for you, that works for your firm. But definitely add Basil as one of the ones that you consider. With that being said, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you, Basil, and thank you, Earmark.